What if the anxiety crushing your confidence, the fear stopping you from trying, and the voice telling you you're never good enough all come from the same lie, that perfection is achievable and anything less makes you worthless? In 2018, a software engineer named David sat in his car after being fired from his dream job at a tech company in San Francisco. He had worked 80-hour weeks, sacrificed his health and relationships, and still it wasn't enough. His manager said his code had too many bugs, his projects took too long, and his perfectionism was actually slowing down the entire team. David was crushed. He had spent his entire life believing that perfection was the goal, that if he just worked harder and made fewer mistakes, he would finally be successful. But here he was, jobless and broken, because his pursuit of perfection had backfired. What David didn't understand yet was that perfectionism isn't about excellence, it's about fear, and that fear was destroying him. Research shows there are two types of perfectionism. Perfectionistic strivings involve setting high standards and striving toward goals. Perfectionistic concerns involve fear of mistakes, harsh self-criticism, and basing your entire self-worth on achievement. Be more awesome. Studies found a significant negative moderate association between self-esteem and perfectionistic concerns, meaning higher perfectionistic concerns is associated with lower self-esteem. Be more awesome. David had perfectionistic concerns. Every mistake felt like proof he was inadequate. Every project had to be flawless or it was worthless. This type of perfectionism doesn't drive success, it drives anxiety, burnout, and depression. The irony is that perfectionists often underperform because they're paralyzed by the fear of not being perfect. They procrastinate on projects because they're terrified of starting something they can't execute flawlessly. They avoid taking risks because failure feels unbearable. They compare themselves to others constantly and always come up short. This pattern destroys careers, relationships, and mental health. After losing his job, David spiraled. He isolated himself, convinced he was a failure. He stopped applying for new positions because he feared more rejection. Then one afternoon, his former college roommate called and invited him to coffee. The friend, now a therapist, listened to David's story and said something that changed everything. You're not failing because you're not good enough. You're failing because you're trying to be something that doesn't exist. Nobody is perfect, and chasing perfection is making you miserable. Research using self-determination theory shows that perfectionistic concerns are associated with lower levels of psychological needs satisfaction and higher levels of needs frustration, vocal media. This means that when you base your worth on being perfect, you never feel competent, autonomous, or connected to others. You're constantly chasing an impossible standard, and every time you fall short, which is inevitable, your self-esteem takes another hit. David's therapist friend suggested he try something radical. For 1 month, intentionally do things imperfectly. Send emails with typos. Submit work that's good enough instead of perfect. Share ideas in meetings, even if they're half-formed. The goal wasn't to be mediocre. The goal was to prove to himself that imperfection wouldn't destroy him. David resisted at first. The idea of deliberately lowering his standards felt like giving up, but he was desperate, so he tried it. He started applying for jobs without obsessing over every word in his resume. He took on a freelance project and delivered it on time, instead of spending extra weeks perfecting every detail. He shared rough drafts of his code with collaborators instead of waiting until it was flawless. And something unexpected happened. People responded positively. Clients appreciated his speed and communication. Coworkers valued his willingness to collaborate early rather than presenting finished work that couldn't be adjusted. Self-compassion can buffer people against negative self-feelings when facing distressing situations or ambivalent feedback, helping individuals accept undesirable aspects of their character instead of obsessing over them. Goodreads. David learned to treat himself with the same kindness he would offer a friend. Within 6 months, David had landed a new job at a smaller tech company with a healthier culture. His new manager noticed something. David was productive, creative, and collaborative. He didn't have the toxic perfectionism that had sabotaged him before. He still held himself to high standards, but he didn't spiral when things went wrong. He accepted that mistakes were part of growth, not proof of failure. The turning point came when David worked on a project that launched with a minor bug. In the past, he would have been devastated, convinced he had ruined everything. But this time, he fixed the bug quickly, communicated transparently with his team, and moved on. His manager praised his problem-solving and accountability. David realized that perfectionism had never made him better at his job. It had just made him miserable. The real world doesn't reward perfection. It rewards resilience, adaptability, and the ability to learn from mistakes. Studies with athletes show that higher perfectionism is linked to lower self-esteem, decreased motivation, and increased burnout. This pattern appears across every field. Students who are perfectionists experience more anxiety and depression. Employees who are perfectionists report higher stress and lower job satisfaction. Parents who are perfectionists struggle with guilt and feel like they're constantly failing their children. The truth that nobody tells you is this: perfection is not the goal. Growth is the goal. Excellence is the goal. But excellence and perfection are not the same thing. Excellence means doing your best with the resources and time you have. Perfection means doing something flawlessly, which is impossible. When you chase perfection, you set yourself up for a lifetime of disappointment because you will never reach it. But when you chase excellence, you give yourself permission to be human. You allow yourself to make mistakes, learn from them, and keep improving. You stop comparing yourself to an impossible standard and start measuring progress against where you were yesterday. David's story is not unique. Millions of people are trapped in the same cycle, believing that if they just work harder, try longer, and fix every flaw, they'll finally be enough. But the research is clear. Perfectionistic concerns, the type rooted in fear and self-criticism, correlates with psychological distress, not success. Be more awesome. If you recognize yourself in this story, here's what you need to do. First, notice when perfectionism shows up. When you're procrastinating on a project, ask yourself if fear of imperfection is holding you back. When you're overworking to the point of exhaustion, ask if you're chasing excellence or trying to prove you're worthy. Second, practice self-compassion. Talk to yourself the way you would talk to a friend. You wouldn't tell a friend they're worthless because they made a mistake. Don't tell yourself that either. Third, embrace imperfection intentionally. Do something badly on purpose. Send the rough draft. Share the unpolished idea. Let people see your process, not just your final product. You'll discover that most people don't care about perfection. They care about authenticity, effort, and connection. Nobody is perfect, and that's not a flaw. That's what makes us human.